how to decide your MVP part 2. In part 1, we talked about what an MVP is and the considerations as far as your capacity and runway and just the general buckets of the MVP and what you're going to be thinking or considering when building your MVP. We're going to talk about part 2, which is the minimum viable product and specifically the different types of MVPs. Before we get into that, though, I have a little note here that says understand and manage. Let me try that again. First, understand and manage their expectations. A little bit of a convoluted sentence, but there's a reason I wrote it that way, because I'm a convoluted person by heart, by nature. Just kidding. I digress. What we're doing is we're establishing sort of your expectations and an understanding of what your users might expect as far as an MVP is concerned. Let me explain it this way. On one side of the spectrum, you're going to have just, minimum viable, right? So what exactly is viable enough? And then on the other hand of the spectrum, you have lovable. I think I spelled that right, lovable. And I get a lot of flack. A lot of people kind of argue with me. They say, Ed, building a crappy MVP doesn't get me anywhere. Well, it depends on the context. This whole thing relies on context, right? And it's one of the skills that we really teach in organization development, executive coaching, consulting, management consulting, is contextual acumen. Understand the context in which you're operating and how that adjusts the way that you're approaching the problem or you are occurring for other people as far as your expertise, how you're helping. So I use this example a lot. This is just kind of my famous thing. This is the minimum viable product. This is the minimum I put in for my video game startup. And it's like, what do cards have to do with it? Well, it's minimum. It's so crappy, but it's just enough to figure out whether something's viable or not. And in this case, I play this with my kids. My kids, they don't need to see bells and whistles. They know what I'm getting at, and they're not going to look at me sideways that I bring them, pieces of paper. If I actually went to like a gaming club or a game store, I said, here's my minimum viable product. You want to buy my future product, or can you validate this or not? Or are they going to look at me funny? And so the context determines whether viable to lovable, where you are on this spectrum, right? So for example, if you are pitching something, a SaaS platform to enterprise, they're going to expect it to look a certain way, right? If you're looking at consumer apps, it's gotten so much easier to launch an MVP that the expectations of a consumer when they download an app are higher than they were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even, because everything now, it just is so much better. Like the technology is so much more accessible. So for example, if you have a website and it doesn't work on mobile, there's no excuse. You are hindering your MVP, the validation of your MVP, because there's so many website providers out there, CMS solutions that automatically make your website act like a mobile app type thing. So there's a minimum expectation. So minimum expectations as far as viable or lovable product. And so when some people say build a minimum lovable product, I get it. I get the reason they're doing it, but that's not always the case. What you think is lovable and what is lovable or what's viable, what proves viability, might be two completely different things. Case in point, when it comes to design, I don't mind a whole bunch of crappy design, because a lot of times, like Reid Hoffman, he said, if you're not embarrassed by your product, you probably are too late in terms of releasing it. You're probably not shipping it fast enough. And usually that has to do with interface and things are clunky, et cetera. Microsoft was notorious for this. They put out software and then they keep patching it, later on. Now that's not MVPs, but you kind of get the idea. At least get something out there. And that's what great founders do. They don't wait for perfection. They say perfection is the enemy of progress or the enemy of good type thing. So you want to put it out there and understand the context. How forgiving are your initial users? And so designers, what they do is we can't put that out there because your interface is a white box with, just a white box where you put in some text and a little button. that's not designed properly. Shouldn't there be pictures and content and all this stuff there? Well, guess what MVP I'm describing? Google. And guess what Google looks like right now? It's just a white screen with a little box with some text and maybe a few icons and, a little bit of branding these days, but it hasn't changed much. So that's where what you may love and what you expect to be a lovable product may not be the same. While at the same time, you may expect something to be viable, but it needs to have a certain degree of lovability to actually help you as far as your MVP is concerned. Okay, now that I kind of got you confused, just understand there are different expectations from your expectations and what your users might have, depending upon the industry, the problem that you're solving, who you're going to be talking to, etc. Look at the context before you decide which MVP and how much of an MVP you're going to build, which is a great segue because I got a video coming after this on that one. It's going to help you out. But in the meantime, let's move forward and let's talk about the different MVPs. Let me give you some examples. So the first is product designs. That's super simple. Just come up with a nice schematic or something like that and say, this is what the product is going to look like. What do you think? Type thing. This is just how we plan it, etc. Like concept art is product design. When we're pitching television animation shows, etc., we just create some concept art and say, this is what it's going to be like, and just do a little synopsis. There you go. This is how the design is going to look, etc. So you may, if you're doing something it's like a 3D rendering or different things like that, and just show the design and paint out the possibilities. Again, that's not the product. Remember, an MVP isn't the light version of your product. It's just some version of the product that will prove or disprove your assumptions in terms of validating or invalidating the viability of your product. So product designs can be very successful in doing that. All right. So you may think in terms of, concepts, renders, etc., all that good stuff, right? So whatever you need to pitch in terms of product design, that's what you want to do. Okay, next one, demo videos. These are great. In fact, I was doing this for my game. So here's how it worked. In a game, I had a product design. This is what the interface would look like to give you an idea. And then the demo video actually animated the gameplay without it being a video game. So it looked like the video game was playing. And so I used Dropbox as an example first. It's just explaining the demo video on how what might work. So you might want to drop a couple bucks on an explainer video. Explainers are really good here, right? Explainer videos. And then just product demos. So you come up with the interface and then you just show, how it might work. And you might want to simulate, which is really easy. You might have kind of a draft on your keyboard. I've seen people do this. They have a non-functioning app and they have the draft up on their screen. And then they just kind of fiddle with the keyboard and type it in and basically make it look like it's actual functional. And then they record it and they send it out, right? Demo videos are particularly popular if you're applying for accelerators, etc. They want to see a demo video that you've actually thought things through and it just becomes real. So that might be an MVP. And so have people watch the demo video and then explaining either, they sign up because they love it or they give you feedback. It didn't make a lot of sense, etc. Again, you're validating or invalidating your MVP. So that's demo video. The next is landing pages. Landing pages, excuse me. I'm just going to erase this here. Landing pages, paid ads, social. So one of the ways that you can figure this out is create a landing page and then buy some paid ads and see, or social ads, see if you can drive people to it. And then they sign up for it, right? So think of like, we're going to talk about this next, crowdfunding, but crowdfunding starts with a landing page. You can actually open a landing page to see if people will sign up for when your crowdfunding page launches. So create a landing page with your service and say, coming soon, beta, etc. Get people to sign up. I've seen people say, pre-purchase the product by putting down $1 deposit, right there. And what you want to do is test the landing page and the messaging. This is the reason it's great for an MVP, because most likely you're getting the same type of observation, their behavior, when someone comes and sees your app or different things and all the text, and what are those pain points that you can advertise, what are the headlines, what's the copy to get someone to take action. So that's landing pages. And so often what people will do is they'll take out paid ads with certain keywords and they'll split test different ads to see, and then they'll show those metrics to investors and say, look at all the people who signed up for it. There was a company, I forgot the name of it, but they did ugly fruit, I think ugly fruit company or something like that. And pretty much the guy spent like, I don't advise this, I think like $145,000 or $150,000 on paid ads. Would you buy ugly fruit and would you have it delivered to your door? Sign up for when we launch. Well, I think he got like 10,000 or 50,000, something like that. And an investor looked at it and said, whoa, you've proven the concept, right? That's an MVP. No fruit, no shipping to the doors. But he said, you've proven the concept, and he got money to pay off his credit cards and then go and start to actually buy the fruit and figure out how to deliver it, right? So then crowdfunding MVP, this is another way. Crowdfunding, people literally give you money to buy the product first before it's finalized and built. You might need a prototype and what have you, but you know, like comic books, video games, etc. So they put the product designs, demo videos, and the crowdfunding page is like a landing page, and you see if people will pre-buy it. I'll bet at sort of discounted rate, you know, for different things. But what crowdfunding MVP does is it brings all the early adopters, and this is what I love about crowdfunding is it gives you an idea who your early adopters are, and what you can do is pre-sell. Not only do you make the money, but you can put some data in front of people and say these are the people that bought, actually plunk down money. This is a commitment. You get your whatever $30 or $10 or what have you reserved on your credit card, and you're on the hook. Now, obviously it gets returned in most crowdfunding campaigns if you don't reach your goals, but I've done crowdfunding MVP before I've raised investment, and through crowdfunding and showing investors the results of the crowdfunding, I've been able to raise about $250,000. So crowdfunding MVP is a great way to validate with early adopters and get really close and know who you're dealing with, who's going to be the first people to buy your product or service. Piecemeal MVP, that's pretty much how it sounds. You piece together into a meal. So think of it like a cafeteria tray where you've got your peas and your carrots, and then the thing for your Salisbury steak, and then your mashed potatoes, and the little section in your tray. You know, maybe I'm dating myself, but the section in your tray for the little milk carton, you know, a little tiny milk carton. Love those cafeteria lunches. Horrible for your health, but lots of fun to go through the cafeteria line and get your cafeteria food there. But pretty much what you do is you take a whole bunch of different software and you piecemeal it together into something that they can use, right? So, you know, it might be something like, okay, I'm going to get a membership software that acts mobile, and then I'm going to embed a table or a functional spreadsheet or something behind the membership software, right? And by embedding the different things, this is going to be a low code MVP. By sort of duct taping all together, it looks like one cohesive experience, but it's not, right? And this is the same as, you know, what they may call a Wizard of Oz MVP. And, you know, how this works is, so Wizard of Oz basically means you just have all this behind the curtain and nobody knows that you're doing it. And other times it could just be straight up right in front of you, right? Some MVPs I've used, like, for example, Basecamp, like project management software. I bring a client on, I say Basecamp's the software we're going to use, and then I upload all a bunch of different stuff and links and everything for them. And it feels like one service, but it's not. It's all these services put together, piecemeal together. So that's a piecemeal MVP. And you need some research. You got to do some research to see what's out there. But thankfully, we are part of a community where you can talk to a whole bunch of people, say, hey, what software does this? And everybody's building software for little pieces of the whole meal. That's how you think about it. All right. So next is Concierge MVP. This is straight manual service. Okay. So if you can deliver what your, let's say, a SaaS platform, right? So imagine you have a SaaS platform and your SaaS platform promises to do this, but you do it manually, either via sheets or, you know, different things, a verbal process, what have you. Let me give you an example. If I'm going to build an assessment software, working on something like this right now that is going to ask and, say eventually use AI and make some decisions based on algorithms, etc. I may do that manually and say, let me concierge it for you and deliver it and do it one-on-one. It's completely unscalable, but guess what? I get really close with my users and I get to know if it makes them happy. And then I figure out how to automate the manual side, the concierge side. So then can I program it into a system and, maybe I start piecemealing it like a off-the-shelf survey system and then have it spit out into a spreadsheet and then go into the AI. So maybe I go, get IBM Watson or Tableau or all the different sort of AI as a service out there. And so now I'm piecemealing it, but it started off with the concierge service. I'm going to do it manually, and put it together. All right. So that's that. Wizard of Oz MVP. Well, spoiler alert, I gave it away. So that's a piecemeal MVP where nobody knows what's happening behind the curtain. And so there are ways that you can mask or white label software and then, make it look like your own, and lots of platforms out there if you want to be in a low code, situation. Zapier is going to be your best friend when it comes to this. So you can create a Zap to automate between, let's say they sign up on your WordPress and then it goes in your Shopify and then it goes to your membership site and updates in your Airtable database and, all that stuff. I don't even know if all those come together, but I'm just throwing names off the top of my head. That's your Wizard of Oz MVP. So remember, put it all behind the curtain and make it look like, it's working that way. And then software prototype. So that's the last one we talked about. So go in and get either you can do it yourself or you can hire outside. You can outsource it and just create a software prototype. And that's, super simple. Just here's the prototype on, how it would work and get people to play around with it and figure it out. The most important thing is to measure every time that you've got your MVP. So each one of these has a different way that you can measure, and they're all different, right? You can install different types. Like, for example, Google Analytics is a great way to measure what's happening on your landing page, conversion button, all this stuff, right? So how are you measuring it and what are the meaningful metrics to show that you're getting towards product market fit and you've got something that is viable is the important thing. So those are your different types of MVPs that you can build. My advice, try them all in your mind. Okay, don't go out and do it. But before you get the software prototype, which is the last one, figure out, okay, if I could just show the design, well, then maybe I'm just going to do the schematic and do the concept and render it and show it to people. That's my MVP, get feedback. And then I'm going to do demo video, get feedback. But brainstorm how you might use each of these as your MVP and leave no stone unturned. Don't go into analogy-based thinking and say, oh, this is the way that I want to do it. This is the way that it normally should be done. Or other people have told me how it's done. Or I read an article in TechCrunch and this is how this multi-gajillionaire did it. That's what we call analogy-based thinking. Use first principles scientific thinking and say, okay, if I was going to make a piecemeal MVP or, low code piecemeal, or if I was going to crowdfund it, what could I possibly do? And that's a great exercise to stretch your mind, stretch your legs, and figure out all the creative ways, because you never know what you're going to come up with versus having tunnel vision and saying, I have to build a software prototype and spending your $150,000 or $100,000. The average app to prototype and get out there is $150,000. And that's just, that's a lot of money. And I could be doing a lot of things with $150,000, let me tell you. So think all these things through. And so before you YOLO your money and put everything at risk, try these different types of MVPs. All right. So the next video, I'm going to talk about, okay, what's the decision-making process? How do we track all this stuff? And that'll bring us to the end of the series. See you in the next video.